It's the biggest expose on the Colgate saga. It's a 42 lakh crore time bomb waiting to explode. Headlines today is now revealing to you the real secret behind the government's cold feet on de-allocation. There are two main reasons and 5 big fears. This is the disturbing reality. Just 10 firms who have coal blocks account for 13% of India's total bank borrowings. These same 10 firms are responsible for 70% of India's power capacity. De-allocation could potentially make 8 out of these 10 firms vulnerable to default. With no strategy in place to protect these companies, a coal default could dominate into a general loan default by the Big 10. That's the potential of a 42 lakh crore default that would cripple India's banking industry. That's the real reason behind the government's extreme caution on de-allocation.
Of ICU to Chile and USA. Rana passed away.
Alright, what we'll do now is go across to Mayur Shekhar Jha, who's brought this huge breaking story. And Mayur, obviously, this is a move that has given the government cold feet, given the kind of numbers involved in an already shrinking economy.
The House may now stand in silence.
In fact, Siddharth, as far as the banks are concerned, their concerns have been right since the day that BJP started demanding the cancellation of the coal blocks. The banks have been aggressively lobbying in Delhi. They've been meeting the officials in the finance ministry, and they are saying that de-allocation of coal blocks is not just about the power sector, it's not just about the coal minings, it's as much about the future of banks as well. So the banks have been saying that any decision should be driven by rationality and not just by political correctness. Now what needs to be seen is whether at the end of the day the government decides to be politically correct, because what we are picking up from sources is that the de-allocation could just be the compromise formula between the Congress and the BJP, and that's the biggest worry of the banks, because 10 large firms who together have taken about 5.5 lakh crore of debts from the government. They attribute, they'll be contributing about 70% of the country's power capacity. If these 10 firms, even if 8 out of these 10 firms default, then that has a huge spiraling effect on the entire banking sector of the country.
But what's the word from the finance minister? Is he going to step in and take sides here?
Absolutely, Siddharth. In fact, the finance ministry will have to step in, because there's one side where the finance ministry sources are telling us is that when the banks had given this representation to the finance ministry had said that the banks should have been more cautious as far as deploying their resources into sectors are concerned. These are 10 large companies that have together got about been beneficiaries of about 13% of the total loans extended by the banks. So the finance ministry said that the biggest risk that the banks have taken is in terms of concentrating their loan profile. That's a huge no that the banks should have been more careful about. But now that banks have done it, the important thing here is to protect the interest of the banks, because the money of the banks is money of people like you and me. The spiraling effect that the collapse of the banking sector will have is much bigger than any other sector, Siddharth.
The numbers we're talking about are huge, and is that the huge worry for the government, Mayur? Because it could impact the likes of you and me, especially given the amount that's been pumped into the coal sector or the power and energy sector by these banks.
In fact, Siddharth, what has kept us, in fact, noted economists have said, what has kept us in a way insulated from global economic crisis is the fact that our banks have been very reasonable as far as their deployment of resources is concerned. So saving the bank is of top priority, and the finance ministry will intervene, and we understand that in the next meeting of the interministerial group, which is now likely on the 6th of September, this representation will be given by the finance ministry to the IMG, and IMG will be, in fact the finance ministry will say that IMG should take this into account before taking any concrete decision as far as de-allocations are concerned.